last thing I remember is the sound, a high, screaming whine that swallowed every other noise in the world, and then nothing. No pain, no fear, just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than any explosion. I remember thinking, in that final half-second, that I had run out of time, that whatever came next would not be mine to control. I was wrong. There was a next. I woke up to a light that did not belong to any sun I knew. It was pale green, soft, moving in slow waves across a ceiling that curved instead of running flat. My body ached in ways I could not explain. My lungs pulled in air that tasted strange, faintly metallic, like biting down on a coin. For a long moment I lay still, waiting for my mind to catch up with my eyes. I was alive. Somehow, impossibly, I was alive. The last mission I remembered was supposed to be simple. Pull our people out, hold the line long enough for the transport to lift off, then follow. I remembered running through smoke, calling names into a radio that only gave back static, and then the sky tearing open above me. After that, nothing. A gap. A silence so complete it felt like the universe had simply stopped keeping track of me. Back home, they would have written a letter by now. They would have folded a flag and handed it to someone who loved me, and told them that Sergeant Elias Cade did not make it out. My name would already be carved somewhere, cold and permanent, a promise that I would never walk through a door again. And yet here I was, breathing. I sat up slowly, testing muscles that felt borrowed rather than owned. The room around me was unlike anything I had ever seen. Smooth curved walls, soft light with no visible source, a floor that felt warm under my palms despite being made of some material I could not identify. There were no straight lines anywhere, as if whoever built this place did not think the way we did back home. A shape moved near the entrance, tall, slender, its skin a pale shade somewhere between blue and gray, its eyes large and dark, set wide apart on a face that had no nose the way I understood one, only two narrow slits that flared gently as it breathed. It froze the moment it saw me sitting up, then it made a sound, something between a chime and a question, and backed away quickly, disappearing through a doorway that irised shut behind it like a camera lens closing. I did not move. I did not know if I should. Minutes passed before the door opened again, and this time several of them entered, moving carefully, almost nervously, like they were approaching something that might break, or something that might strike. One of them carried a small device that hovered gently above its palm, and pointed it toward me. A voice followed, thin and mechanical at first, stitched together from fragments of sound, but slowly becoming clearer with each sentence. You are conscious, you are healing, you are safe. I asked where I was. The device took a moment before it translated my words into their language, and I watched the tall figures exchange glances, quiet and uncertain, before one of them answered. You are on Vera, our world. We found your vessel adrift, broken, far from anything we recognized. And we did not expect to find something alive inside it. I asked how far. The answer, once it finally came through the translator, hollowed something out inside my chest. Distances measured in numbers that meant nothing to me until they were converted into terms I could understand. Years, not days. Systems away, not miles. Whatever pulled my broken pod through space had carried me far beyond anywhere my people would ever think to look. I was not rescued. I was lost, and found by strangers who had never expected to find anyone at all. Over the days that followed, I learned who they were, the Vayrans, a quiet, careful people who had built cities of light and towers that hummed with clean, silent power, who had mapped their stars and cured their sicknesses, and never once, in their long recorded history, fought a war against each other. Their language had no true word for enemy. Their history had no true word for battle. They had grown so far beyond conflict among themselves that the concept had become almost mythical to them, something read about in old stories, never lived. At first I thought that made them lucky. I learned otherwise soon enough. There was a woman among them named Leora, one of the healers who had first found me in that wreck. She was the one who spent the most time with me, patiently teaching me their words, learning mine in return, sitting beside my bed with a quiet curiosity that never turned into fear, not even when I told her, plainly, what I had been. A soldier, someone trained to protect, and if necessary, to fight. She did not understand the word fight the way I meant it, not truly, not yet. It was on the 9th day that everything changed. I remember the alarm because it did not sound like any alarm I knew. It was gentle, almost musical, a rising tone that should never have meant danger, and yet the moment it echoed through the halls, every Veyran around me went still, their eyes wide, their movements suddenly clumsy with fear. Leora grabbed my arm, urging me toward a shelter chamber, her voice trembling as she explained. Raiders, from beyond the outer ring. They come sometimes, taking what they want, leaving nothing behind but broken things. I asked how they defended themselves. She looked at me like the question itself did not make sense. We do not. We hide. We wait for them to leave. That was the moment I understood exactly how far from home I really was. I followed her, not into the shelter, but toward the outer wall, where a handful of Vayrans stood frozen, watching lights approaching from the sky, ships descending with the calm confidence of people who had never once been challenged. I asked what weapons they had. None, truly. Tools, meant for building, for cutting stone, for shaping metal, nothing designed to stop another living thing. I took what I could find, a cutting tool repurposed into something sharper, a length of reinforced cable. My hands remembered things my mind had almost let go of, old training surfacing like muscle memory, older than thought itself. I positioned the frightened Vayrans behind cover, showed them how to use the terrain, how to create noise in one place while movement happened in another. Simple things, the kind of tactics that felt like second nature to me and like sorcery to them. When the raiders landed, they expected nothing. They found resistance instead, clumsy, improvised, but real. I did not need to defeat them outright. I only needed to make them believe that taking anything from this place would cost them more than they were willing to pay. Confusion spread through their ranks quickly. Within minutes, their ships lifted off again, retreating the way they had come, unwilling to risk further loss for a target that no longer looked easy. The silence after they left was different from the silence I remembered from my old life. This one was full of disbelief. Leora found me sitting against the outer wall, my hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline, staring at the sky where the ships had disappeared. She sat beside me without a word for a long moment, before finally asking the question I could see forming in her eyes since the moment the raiders left. How did you know what to do? I told her the truth, that where I came from, conflict was not a myth. It was something we trained for, prepared for, sometimes lived through, and often lost people to. I told her about the weight of carrying that knowledge, the exhaustion of always being ready for the worst, the strange, aching pride in protecting people who never had to learn how. She asked if I could teach them. I did not answer right away. Some part of me wanted to refuse. I had already lost one life to conflict. The idea of shaping another world around the same lessons felt like carrying a wound forward instead of letting it close. But then I thought about the fear on their faces as the ships descended, the complete helplessness of a people who had never needed to imagine defending themselves, and I understood that refusing would not protect them from what was coming. It would only leave them unprepared for it. So I said yes. The following months blurred together in a way that felt both endless and impossibly fast. I trained small groups at first, teaching them how to move with purpose instead of panic, how to read a threat before it fully arrived, how to build simple defenses that did not rely on hoping an enemy would simply leave. It was strange, teaching people who had never needed these lessons before, watching understanding dawn slowly across faces that had spent their entire lives believing safety was something the universe simply provided. Leora became one of my sharpest students, quick to learn, quicker to question everything I told her, pushing back whenever something felt wrong to her instincts. I welcomed the questions. A soldier who never questions orders becomes dangerous eventually. And I did not want to build an army of people who simply obeyed. I wanted to build people who understood why they were doing what they were doing. Word of what happened during the raid spread beyond our settlement faster than I expected. Other communities reached out, cautious at first, curious about the strange visitor who had turned back an attack without truly harming anyone, who spoke of defense instead of aggression, protection instead of conquest. I made it clear, every single time, that what I was teaching was not about becoming what had once threatened me back home. It was about the simple, difficult truth that peace without the ability to defend itself is not peace at all. It is only luck, waiting to run out. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some Vayran leaders feared that learning to resist would slowly turn their people into something else, something harder, colder, less like themselves. I understood the fear. I had seen, in my own history, how easily the tools meant for protection could be twisted into something meant for control. I made sure, in every lesson, every conversation, that the line between defense and domination stayed clear and unmistakable. We were not building weapons to take. We were building the will to keep what was already theirs. The real test came almost a year after I first woke up in that pale green room. The raiders returned, but this time they did not come alone. Word had spread among them too, about a settlement that no longer behaved the way easy targets should. They came with more ships, more numbers, clearly intending to end whatever resistance had grown here before it could spread any further. I remember standing at the edge of our defenses that day, looking out at a sky filling with approaching lights, and feeling something settle in my chest that I had not felt since my old life ended. Purpose. Not the reckless purpose of someone with nothing left to lose, but something steadier, rooted in the people standing beside me, people who had trusted a stranger from another world enough to change everything about how they saw themselves. Leora stood near me, calm in a way she would not have been a year earlier, directing groups toward their positions with quiet confidence. Other settlements had sent support as well, more Vayrens than I had ever trained personally, spreading the lessons themselves, teaching each other in the months I had not been present. It struck me then how far this had grown, how something I had started almost reluctantly had taken root and multiplied entirely on its own. The confrontation that followed was nothing like the wars I remembered from home. There was no desire for conquest here, no drive to destroy. Every tactic I had taught was built around disruption, protection, and controlled resistance, not domination. We used the terrain, the layout of our defenses, coordinated movement designed to make the raiders believe our numbers and our resolve were far greater than they truly were. It worked exactly as I hoped it would. Faced with resistance they had not expected twice, and unwilling to risk the losses required to break through it, the raiders withdrew again, this time for good. Word traveled quickly through whatever networks connected their kind, and Veyra, once known as an easy, undefended target, became known instead as a place no longer worth the risk. In the quiet that followed, I found myself standing again at the edge of the settlement, watching a sky finally empty of threat, and felt something I had not expected to feel in this second life: peace. Not the fragile, accidental peace the Vayrens had lived under before, built on luck and the hope that no one would ever test it, but something earned, something built with intention. Leora found me there, as she often did, and sat quietly beside me for a long while before speaking. "You saved something none of us knew we were losing," she said. "Not just our safety, our understanding of what safety actually requires." I thought about home then, about the life I had lost, about the family who believed I was gone, about the version of myself that had died in that first battle so far away. I would likely never see that world again. The distance was too great, the odds of ever returning too small to hold on to as anything more than a quiet hope. But sitting there, surrounded by people who had built something new out of the lessons I carried with me, I understood that my story had not ended the day I was declared dead. It had simply changed direction. Over time, what began in that single settlement spread across Veyra, and eventually, through trade routes and careful diplomacy, to neighboring worlds who had heard whispers of a people who had learned, almost overnight, how to protect themselves without losing who they were. They called it, in their own language, something that translated roughly into the teaching of the stranger who returned from the dead. I never fully grew comfortable with the title, but I understood why it stuck. To them, I had come back from something they believed was final, carrying knowledge that reshaped how an entire civilization understood its own survival. Years passed. I grew older among people who were not my own, yet had become mine in every way that mattered. I watched students I had personally trained become teachers themselves, watched settlements that once trembled at the sound of an approaching ship stand steady and prepared instead. I watched Leora rise into a role of quiet leadership, carrying forward everything we had built together, with a wisdom that had long since surpassed anything I had originally taught her. Sometimes, late at night, I would take out the small set of tags I still wore around my neck, worn smooth from years of touch, the only piece of my old life that had survived the journey with me. I would think about the people back home who believed my story had ended in fire and silence, who never knew that somewhere, impossibly far away, that same story had continued, shaping a world they would never know existed. I never returned home. The distance remained too vast, the odds too small, and eventually I made peace with that truth the same way I had made peace with everything else this strange second life had asked of me. My home had simply become larger than I once believed possible, stretching across a world I had learned to love, among people who had once feared conflict so deeply they could not even name it, and now stood steady in the face of it, because a stranger from another sky had refused to let them remain unprepared. They marked me dead once, back where I began, out here, among the quiet towers and pale green light of a world I never expected to see. That was simply where my story truly started. Not as a soldier fighting for survival, but as something quieter, steadier, something closer to what protection was always meant to mean. A second life, built not on the battles I had already fought, but on the ones I helped an entire galaxy learn never to fear again.